Hello, friends. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me today. I have a very special guest for you. Her name is Alba Monn. Alba's story is very unique in the sense that she had a shared death experience with one of her children. I was deeply challenged through hearing Alba's story. Alba's third child died after a car accident, had to be resuscitated, and was brought to another ICU in another clinic. Alba had an emergency operation and was still bleeding internally and in the process of dying when her NDE occurred and she was able to interact with her child. Alba has written a book called Proof of Eternity, which is available on Amazon. The link will be in the description. She has requested not to show her face online, so instead I will be putting up a series of nature scenes while she is talking. Please don't let this discourage you from watching the interview because she has some very deep insights to share with us. Thank you so much for watching. Here's Alba. Hello, Alba. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very much looking forward to hearing your story and learning from you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And would you like to start by just sharing your near-death experience, any events that led up to it that you feel are important for us to know about?
Yes, of course. Great. I was 8 months pregnant with my daughter, and she was my third child. And I was a little bit nervous during the pregnancy because I had had premonition dreams that had been a little bit of a trouble for me because I had never had any bad dreams in any of my previous pregnancies. But I tried to focus and stay positive. And when I was around 8 months, I had an accident. And after that accident, I had to undergo an emergency operation and stay in the ICU unit of the clinic near our home. And my daughter was clinically dead after the accident, and she had to be resuscitated and taken to another specialized clinic to get the proper treatment for her. Unfortunately, she only had a heartbeat at the time, so she had no brain functions and no other vital signs anymore. And nobody ever told me about it because when all of that, was stated, I was still in the OR, so I didn't get any information about that. And after my emergency operation had been done, there had been complications, and instead of about 20 or 30 minutes, it took nearly 2 hours, and I was still internally bleeding at the time, and the doctors were not supposed to finish the operation. So they got back to another emergency section team from another hospital, and they checked back on what to do with me. And they finally decided to just, finish the operation and sew me up and just get it over with, because otherwise I would be sooner or later dead on the operating table. So they didn't want for that to happen. And I had no idea that my circumstances were that bad. I just knew that I had an emergency operation, and all of my thoughts and worries were focused on my baby girl. So there was no time for me to realize that I was in the process of dying at the time. And the doctors, of course, didn't inform my husband because they were afraid that if he would know the truth, they would get in a lot of trouble because according to their laws in the hospitals, they are not supposed to sew anyone up without stopping the bleeding first, because otherwise I would be in trouble and in the process of dying by internally bleeding. And so that were the surroundings. I was in a hospital bed, and I was fighting to see my daughter before she was taken to the other clinic. And the doctors were trying to hinder me to see her, to even meet her after my operation, because later on they told me that the explanation was that they didn't want for me to get worked up, and they didn't want for me to get nervous or worried because I was in a bad state anyway. But I think that's just an excuse because they were trying to yeah, I don't know how to say it, but they were trying to not to make me and my husband realize what the real effects of all these circumstances were. And they were just trying to um, make sure that they wouldn't get in any trouble whatsoever. And the problem is that they didn't even tell the doctors that came in the next morning. So all of that happened during the night. And they were, of course, supposed to write that down, that there had been complications during the operation and that I was still in the process of dying and internally bleeding, and they had not been able to stop that. But of course, they didn't want to get themselves in trouble, so they didn't even mention anything about it. So nobody knew that I was still about to die, except for those doctors who had been there in the operating room, and they didn't say a word. And my husband and I, we thought that I was out of trouble and just on my way to recovery. And we were really worried about our baby girl. And finally, I was able to meet her. So they had to wheel me out on my hospital bed um, into the section where they could come up with her incubator so that we would have enough space. There were lots of doctors, nurses, and the people who were supposed to take her to the other clinic. So were lots of medical personnel. I didn't have any chance to talk to my husband privately or even, say a few words about um, what my thoughts and worries were, or just ask any questions. So he was not able to tell me that there had been complications because he was aware that the operation took a lot longer than they had told me, a lot longer than expected. And he couldn't communicate with me. I couldn't communicate with him. We were just focusing on our daughter, and she had to be um, on on a breathing machine, so she wasn't able to breathe on her own. And we didn't even know that she had no brain functions. To us, she looked like she was asleep or maybe sedated, because we knew that the doctors had been working on her to resuscitate her and make sure that she was coming back from being clinically dead, but we had no idea how bad her situation really was at that time. And additionally, the problem was that not only those circumstances were very bad for me personally and for our child, but also there had been a conflict between me and my husband. Before going to the hospital, he had, in a kind of panic, he had left. He went into his car and he drove away right after the accident, even though I had told him he must take me to the hospital immediately. And he didn't listen. I think he was in a big shock and he didn't know what he was doing. But anyway, I was really mad at him, and I had to call him and make sure that he would come back home to take me to the hospital, because our older child was not even 2 years old, and I saw no way to go to a clinic with a toddler in tow, knowing that they might have to do some procedures on me and nobody would look after her. And it was nearly the middle of the night, so I wouldn't want to wake up my mom or call anyone else to come, because this would stir up a lot of additional attention that I really didn't need in this situation. I just wanted to go to the hospital, and he took me there. But this conflict situation between us, there was no ability for me to address it, because I was wheeled into the ICU and he was sent home with our toddler girl, and the little baby, our smaller daughter, had been taken to the clinic. So the whole family was taken apart, and there was no way to make up for the conflict that we had had beforehand.
Wow, that I can't imagine how scary that and how hard that must have been to not be able to talk to him through all of that.
Yes, because also in the car on our ride to the hospital, he tried to, make sure to ask me how I was. And I realized he was trying to get back in touch with me and maybe excuse himself for having reacted that way. But I was in such inner turmoil because of my fear about the health of my baby that I wasn't able to react to it. So I completely ignored what he tried to say, and I looked out of the window and I didn't react. I didn't even look at him. I was so mad. I was not able to address anything because I thought my focus is on getting to the clinic and that's it. And I actually had already decided to leave him right after coming back from the hospital because of what had happened. And this relationship, this marriage was over in my eyes because of it. And I thought to myself, this reaction of him was inexcusable. There was no way that I would ever forgive him for what he had done and for what I had been through, in this fearful situation, worrying about the life of my child actually, and having nobody there with me to, to rely on or even to help me. And I was not willing to let anyone know. That was the next problem. I had not told anyone later on, even not my family, not my friends, no doctors. So nobody knew that something had happened before we came to the hospital, because I thought, what good would it do? I wouldn't do anyone any good with it. And I just thought that I had to make it up for myself while I was in the hospital. I had to stay there for several days because I had another emergency operation later on, right after my NDE, that actually saved my life. So in my NDE, I was informed that I was in life danger. And to be honest, I couldn't really believe it. I thought that this was something totally out of even a thought of being true. And anyway, so while I was in the ICU, my only worries were about my child. I tried to figure out how many minutes, had several steps taken, just trying to find out how much time had passed between the accident and between us going to the hospital. And even then, they didn't give us the real necessary procedures. I told them I need an ultrasound, for instance, and they didn't do any of that. They just did something else, and they wanted to send me home. And my blessing was that I had already had 2 other children, and I knew about pregnancy and the dangers of a child. And I knew immediately that my daughter was in a very, very bad place, and there had to be done something very crucial to save her life. My only worry was about saving her life, actually, and nobody believed me in the hospital. It took over 30 minutes for them to finally get a doctor to do the necessary procedures and do the ultrasound. And then even they forgot to turn on the monitor. So I was the only person, because it was in the middle of the night, that tried to figure out what they were doing. They didn't even realize they didn't turn the monitor on in time. So, I mean, it was a horrible situation in every kind of way. And I was in this ICU trying to figure out what the chances were for my daughter, for my little girl, to ever recover, or maybe to figure out what her disability would be like, if she had a chance to have a more or less normal life. Or I already figured she might be in a wheelchair, or even worse, that she would never be able to sit in a wheelchair. That were my thoughts. And then a nurse came in, and she changed some of my machinery. So she was checking on some things all around my body, and I didn't really pay attention to what she was doing. But as she saw that I was laying in this hospital bed crying silently, she addressed me and she said, "Oh, it would be best if your baby wouldn't survive, because there's no way that she would ever recover from the bad state that she was in. So I should more or less, I should accept that it would be best if she wouldn't live on." And I told her, I was in such a state of inner fury and rage and hatred against all these circumstances. It all felt so unfair, and um, my attitude against my husband, it all consumed me inside. I was being consumed by all these negative emotions that I was not able to ever articulate in this situation. So when she told me that, I told her, "How could you say that to me? I mean, this is my child." I told her, she's my 3rd child, and I love her just as much as my older 2 children. There's no way that I would ever think it would be best if she didn't survive. I mean, how could she tell me that? And I remember she looked at me with a scary look in her eyes, totally scared of that kind of reaction from me. Obviously, she had expected that I would say, oh, I'm just of the same opinion. It would be better that my child wouldn't live on. I mean, I was totally startled how she could expect that from me. And in retrospect, I know, of course, that she wanted to console me in a way, that she wanted to let me know truths that nobody else had ever told me, because she told me that my child was in life danger. And she also told me that she was heavily disabled, and nobody else had told me those things. But still, the way that she talked to me, I couldn't accept any of it. And so she just left, and she was shocked about it. And a few minutes later, my NDE started. And I think that this reaction that I had in this short conversation with this nurse was actually a trigger for my NDE to start, because on the other side, obviously somebody decided that they had to do something about it, because I had no idea that I was about to die. I was in a horrible state emotionally inside, full of these negative emotions about the circumstances of the accident and of the the conflict with my husband and me, and also about what had happened in the hospital, that nobody had believed what I had said, and that I was nearly sent home and I would have died within 2 hours. The doctor told me the next day, if I had gone home as it was recommended to me, I would have just fallen asleep at home and lost consciousness and died within 2 hours at home. At the fluid of my blood was coming into the amniotic fluid with no hesitation. So it was a complete dangerous situation. And also this emergency operation didn't really change much about it. So within a few minutes after that nurse had left the room, I realized, laying in my bed, still kind of calculating the minutes that had led up to the accident and to our arrival in the hospital. I was still counting different steps in time. I realized that somebody was present behind my bed. So I felt a presence standing, a person standing behind me, behind my head, at the upper end of my hospital bed. And I was astonished when I realized that I feel somebody near me. And I was asking myself, who could that be? I mean, who should that be? And at the same moment, I got the answer, that's my child, my daughter. And I was so puzzled. I was not able to think really, because I was so astonished. And as soon as I was trying to grasp what was going on, I didn't have any time to adjust to the situation, because she started to talk to me immediately. And the way she talked to me was telepathic. So I had the feeling that she was saying sentences, that she was saying things to me, but not verbally. So it was an intention to tell me things, and it was like sentences. I heard them in my mind, but I also answered to her statements, but I also didn't say them. It was just a mental discussion, if you wish to say what it was like. So she immediately told me two words that she kept repeating, and they were "forgive him." And I, of course, realized what she was talking about. Obviously, she had all information about the conflict situation that occurred before the accident and before we had arrived in the clinic. So I told her immediately, that's impossible, and I can't forgive any of it because it's unforgivable. And so she kept repeating, "Forgive him." And while she was doing that for several times, I was trying to figure out what was going on. I mean, I was laying in my ICU bed. I was feeling perfectly all right. I was aware of what was going on around me. So I felt perfectly normal, but my daughter was grown up and talking to me, and I was uh, not really sure of what to think of it. And so I had a few moments to think of how I should react, or if I should maybe get immersed in this situation. I was still trying to figure out what was going on. when she was repeatedly asking me to forgive him. And so a conversation started. I talked back to her, trying to make her understand that from my standpoint, what she was asking made no sense at all. And she told me, for instance, that if I wouldn't forgive him, we would split up. And I would tell her, oh, who would care about that? Because I have already decided I don't want to stay with him anyway. So it doesn't matter. She tried to warn me that the split up was ahead of me, but that didn't make any difference to me, because that was something that I was happy to do anyway. And so she told me other things to try to make me change my mind. And the more she talked to me, the angrier and the more upset I got. And I was just getting more and more upset, because I felt like I was not able to talk about the whole situation with anyone. And then someone shows up. For some reason, it is my child, that is just a newborn in another clinic, and not even she does understand what I'm trying to say, or she doesn't understand what my standpoint is. And it was really frustrating to some extent. And at the same time, she told me some things that made me realize that she might be on a good track, that maybe I was wrong, you know? So she made me wonder if I was right with all these arguments that I brought up. And one of the things that she said was, I told her, how can he disappoint me like that? And I had always given my best. And what does he do? I mean, he just leaves. And so she told me, her answer was, maybe he didn't do it on purpose. And this was a sentence that really touched me and made me realize that he actually didn't do it on purpose. And obviously he had no bad motivation for what he had done, but it was just something that happened and he had more or less no control over. So I realized that his motivations weren't bad, and maybe his attitude even was pure and good, even though he didn't know what he was doing, because with this accident, there were no outward signs, there were no wounds or no bleeding that he would have realized that I'm right and he's wrong. He just felt like I'm ushering him out of the house in the middle of the night, telling him to take me to the hospital. And he thought he didn't know why he should do that. Anyway, so we got on with this conversation. And at some point she told me that, I told her I can understand that where she's coming from, and that forgiveness is good, and it is necessary, even maybe philosophically speaking, but for me it's not possible in this situation. It's too much. And I was too consumed by what had happened. And anyway, then she told me she can forgive too, and with her it's about her whole life. So when she said that, I was thinking to myself, obviously she means that she um, must be disabled, and that's what she's talking about, and a physical disability of some kind. But at the same time, I got a little bit worried, because I knew that obviously she was able to read my mind, so I didn't want to get into this whole focus on disability. So I tried to brush it off and told her, well, it just means that you are a lot better in forgiving than I am. So I just tried to stop that link in our conversation, and just to get back where we were and not make her uncomfortable, because I felt a little bit guilty for having these state or her physical state when she was close to me and realizing what I was thinking. So it was a little bit uncomfortable for me. But at some point, I just told her that I understand what she's talking about, and I can agree that she's right, but that I'm not willing and able to do what she's asking me. And obviously this telepathic conversation was over with that final statement from me. And I tried to be nice to her and to let her know in a friendly way, but she accepted it as I figured, because the conversation stopped. And I was a little bit relieved because I thought, okay, maybe she understood where I'm coming from, and so this is over now. But a couple of moments later, she appeared on my visitor's chair right next to my ICU bed, and I was totally irritated. And I didn't know what to think, because I immediately sensed that she was my daughter. This is my child, the same child that is laying more or less nearly clinically dead in another clinic. And she was more than an hour away from me by car. So I didn't know what to think about it. I was overwhelmed, and I tried to concentrate on what I was seeing. And she looked like 26 years old. She looked like someone with a very old-fashioned hairdo. Her clothes were strange. They looked old-fashioned to me. And later on, I tried to figure out what kind of time frame that clothing and that hairdo could stem from. And I did some research on it, and I found that it was close to the 20s, the roaring 20s of the last century, of what she would look like. And I was totally irritated by the way that she looked. And I tried to figure out what hairdo would look better on her, or maybe what clothes she should wear if she would want to appear a little bit nicer and more, not so out of date. So I had total banalities in my mind. I was just, just figuring out how to change her appearance in a way so that she would look more familiar to the present time. Maybe I was just irritated by her. And she had her hands put together in a gesture of prayer, and she had a very, very sad and a very emotional look in her eyes. But she didn't say a word. She didn't talk to me. She just looked at me pleadingly with her fingers in a gesture of prayer. And I knew that she was trying to tell me the same thing that she had been trying to tell me in the telepathic discussion, that I should forgive my husband. And I knew that she was pleading for me to forgive him without words this time. But I was so irritated by this whole situation, and by seeing her sitting in my visitor's chair being grown up. I was just so shocked in a way that I couldn't communicate with her. I didn't even want to pay much attention to what she was trying to get through to me. I was trying to figure out how to escape from this situation. And I realized I have no way to escape this situation. I have to lay in my next to my visitor's chair. I have to lay in my ICU bed and just undergo this huge pressure. And it felt like an immense pressure that she put on me with this pleading. And at some point, I turned my head away from her because I just wanted to get it over with, to be honest. I was disgusted with this whole thing. It seemed like so much pressure on me in an unfair way, because how would she not understand where I'm coming from? You know what I mean? So it was just unbelievable that she would ask me that, and repeatedly ask me that. And I was just kind of frustrated with what she looked like. I just put my head to the other side, and I remember I closed my eyes. I was fed up with this whole situation, and I just wanted to get over with it. And at that point, I heard her whisper a real sentence, and I heard it with my eyes, with physical senses. I heard her whisper a sentence, and this sentence was like an energy wave of fire, or maybe of I don't know, of real heat and energy going through me in a split of a second from head to toe. And it felt like it was going through the inner parts of my bones. I've never even thought of something like that. It was unbelievable. And it was like a flash of fire going through me. I felt the inner marrow of my bones. And at the same time, this sentence that she whispered physically catapulted me into another sphere. and I was trying to find out where I was. I was standing up, and I felt full of energy. I felt healthy. I had no problems with any of parts of my body at all. I felt strong and focused on finding out where I was, but at the same time, I realized I was not in an earthly surroundings anymore. So I was somewhere else. And so I was standing upright, and I had a body. I had a physical feeling of my normal body, and I was trying to find out where I was. And there was a lot of heat, like fire, in and around my chest area. And when I found out that there was something strange going on, because I felt like fire burning around my heart, I looked down at me, and I actually saw bundles of fire or light coming out of my body, and it was just unbelievable. And I tried to find out where they were going, because there were two different bundles of light. One went to the left side and one went to the right side in front of me. And to my astonishment, I saw my husband and me standing around 20 to 25 feet away from where I was looking. And I realized that these bundles of light, or bundles of fire, turned into light a few feet away from me, maybe 5 feet away from me or 6 feet away from me. They started to just appear like flashlights, like the lights of flashlights, very strong lights. And they were going towards the direction of me and my husband. And we were standing away from me. And I saw that we had our arms lifted up towards each other, so that we formed a kind of gateway with our arms and with our hands. We nearly touched, our fingertips nearly touched, and we had both our hands up around 45-degree angles, and creating a 90-degree angle that looked like a medieval portal and like a doorway. And as I was looking at us in astonishment, I was asking some questions. I was asking myself, what is this? What is coming out of my chest area, out of my heart? What is this light, or these fire bundles that come out of me without anything that I have done? I mean, without even me noticing what is going on. And the answer was immediately, that's love. And I was overwhelmed, because I realized it's the truth, but I had no idea what it was supposed to mean, really. And then I looked at us, and I asked myself, what is this? What I'm looking at? What is this portal, or this doorway that I look at, in front of me and my husband? I was on the left side, my husband was on the right side. So I got this answer, that's the door of life. And as I was looking on, I realized that with this combination of our two lives, of our two bodies, and of us in all different kinds of aspects, there was a combination of us that opened up a doorway for her to walk into her life. And I realized that I was looking at the wonder of life, because it's a wonder. And I realized that we are connected with all other parents on earth right now, and also with all of our forefathers. And I realized that we are connected in time into the past of all of our, grandparents, great grandparents, and just all of those different generations towards the past, until we would be connected to the beginning of life on earth, and also connected on earth, like around the globe, towards all of those other parents that are opening portals of life, doorways of life for their children. And so I was standing there in awe. And while I was still thinking about what was going on, I realized that I was presented a way to look inside us, inside of me and my husband at the same time. And it was like I could see inside us with our character, as if I would get an analysis of different aspects of character traits with percentages, and just as if a computer would run down, you know, in front of you, and you would see all those numbers and the different data that it was coming up with. So it was different character traits that I, for instance, like patience, or other character traits like empathy, or yeah, the way to accept other people's opinions. Just different character traits were just listed in front of me, and I was still trying to find out what was going on, and switching from my side to my husband's side, and trying to figure out what was going on. And so this was presented to me, and when I had this impression that I understood everything about this portal of life, this door of life, the light went further away from me, and for some reason I saw again maybe 20 to 30 feet away from me and my husband standing there, I saw huge scales, like old-fashioned pharmacy scales, that were 3 times as big as my husband and I were. So this was a huge thing, and as soon as it appeared, I was alarmed. It was it had a sense of authority, it has a sense of earnesty and no doubts. So it was like these scales are without any mistake. So whatever they show is the truth, and there's no way to change it, to argue with it, or yeah, there's no way that you could interact with the result. That was the feeling that I got. And I was just staring ahead, trying to figure out what I was looking at. And I saw that the scales were in a total balance. And there was some part behind me and a part of the scales behind my husband. And I realized, I was asking myself, what is this that's presented to me on these scales? And I got this answer: that's the bunches of sins. So I was trying to figure out what those bunches were like. And they were very spiky and dark on my side. And they were like a jellyfish on my husband's side. And I realized that it's a calculation, or a programming of our whole lifetime up to that moment. And it was in relation to all those character traits that were shown to me before, and taking all of these potentials, or these character trait potentials into account. That was the end result of our lifetime as it was calculated for that time being. And I realized that the whole time that our lives had taken up to then were tested, or I analyzed, and it felt like in a comparison, it felt like our lifetime was very, very small parts of earth, or soil, or maybe very, very small parts of rice, for instance, and they had to fit through a kind of grid. And so our whole lifetime was kind of like shoveled through a sieve or through a grid, and everything else had fit through those holes of this grid. So everything else was fine, everything else was through, and not to be bothered with anymore. So all of the rest of it was okay, but those were the results that were not able to pass through this grid or through the sieve. So these were the particles that were too big, and that we would have still had needed time to work on, so to speak. And I realized when I was looking at my pile that those bunches of sins on my side, they were something about pride, and maybe also prejudice in a way, because it was very hurtful to look at them and to know that there are sea creatures and they have those little black sparks. Do you know what I mean? It looked like a bunch of those creatures piling up, and being a symbol of being too hard on others, maybe even only in my thoughts, because as I was looking at that, I realized I'm not really a person who actually tells others about these critical thoughts that I have. I'm just trying to, pull back and keep them to myself, but still I was judging others the whole time, obviously, and especially my husband in this situation. And it felt like all these harsh feelings of anger and also guilt and hatred about my fate, because I felt it was just so unfair that something like that would happen to me. So there were accusations against my husband and against my fate and even against God, to be honest, while I was in this ICU bed. So all of this was piling up. And behind my husband, there were jellyfish piling up, and it was like the way that he had some character traits that were a problem, actually, because he had no backing up. There was nothing hard or nothing of a certain form that he showed. And on the contrary, it just showed that he had no actual form. Like these jellyfish, they float through water, and wherever the waves take them, they have to go. Do you know what I mean? It was a realization of the character traits that were his bunches of sins at that point. And the more I understood what was presented to me, the more I understood that I should have shown some understanding for my husband's attitude as well. So the more I was confronted with these insights, the more I felt like I actually need to be forgiven, not only my husband. So I was confronted with all the things that I had done wrong or that were on my side as well, some kinds of sins or mistakes that I had made. And the words, that bunches of sins, I didn't really mind at that time. I remember that I had this attitude that it was a little bit too religious for me to accept it very nicely in this situation. It just felt a little bit strange to get this analyzation that these were bunches of sins. But I said to myself in this situation, oh, it's just a bunch of mistakes that we have made, or everything that was not okay in the past and in the present situation up to that point. And it was just a summary of it's just the truth in a way. That's what it felt to me. And as soon as I had this inner conviction that I would understand everything, I remember I thought I understand everything. And at that point, I was catapulted out of the sphere, and I was somewhere totally different. And as I was trying to find out where I was, I realized that I was on my favorite mountain, just underneath the mountaintop, um, actually in the weather conditions of that specific time of day, just around um, daylight. So it was very windy, very cold, and it wasn't nice to be there. But I realized I had only seen it in nice and sunny weather, but I knew where I was, and I knew the path before me. And there was a little gate, maybe 20 feet away from me. So I knew my path, I knew where I was going, and I was taking a few steps to, complete the way up to the mountaintop. And I was looking to my side and trying to figure out if the fog was getting worse or if it was going away at the right side. And when I was looking back in front of me, there was a huge black boulder, way bigger than I was, about 6 or 7 feet in diameter. So it was 6 or 7 or even 8 feet high and completely round, but it was surrounded by all sharp edges, black edges and spiky edges. So it looked very, very scary. And I realized immediately that I was not able to escape from it, because it was just, a few feet ahead of me. And at my left side, there was very steep mountain rocks. And on my right side, there was a very steep hill. So I couldn't go anywhere around it. And I realized that when I would turn around and run away from it back to the bottom of the mountain, I would be able to be crushed underneath it. I wouldn't even see it coming. You know, it could start rolling just behind me and crush me in no time. So I was standing there, totally shocked and realizing for the first time that I was in life danger. And that was something that was absolutely correct in reality. And it was presented to me in this situation in my NDE. And again, I felt healthy, I felt strong, and I was willing to walk the rest of the way, but there was no way that I could even take a few more steps. And I was so astonished and so shocked. I realized I'm in life danger. There's no way out. And I was still trying to figure out how I could save myself from this horrible fate that was obviously presented to me. And I knew that my path was over. And for some reason, I felt that my path of life was about to be over. And I realized that that this would mean that I could never fulfill my destiny. That was also some of my thoughts, that I felt I can never fulfill my destiny because I had this inner wish, this silent wish to change everything when I was in this room of truth. Oh, I didn't mention, I was thinking to myself, where am I in this other sphere? When the light came out of my heart region, I asked myself, where am I? And I got this answer that I'm in the hall of truth, or in the chamber of truth. And the longer I was there, the easier it got and the more I understood. In the beginning, it was very hard, but it got easier and easier until I had realized that I understood everything, and then it was over. So it was obviously combined to the way that I was able to grasp things or to understand what was presented to me. And I had all the time in the world to figure out what I was supposed to understand. And as soon as this was done, I was catapulted out of it. And now in this situation, I realized there's my path. I want to finish it, but there's no way that I can go on. And to be honest, I was so much in fear and so much in shock that I was not able, after a few times, to try to find a way to escape or even a concept to escape. I finally realized there's no way out. And then I was so startled and shocked and astonished that I was not able to have another clear thought. And as I was standing there staring at this huge threat in front of me, a life-threatening situation, I had like an inner memory, like an acoustic memory of the telepathic situation with my daughter. And I heard a memory of her pleading, forgive him, forgive him. So this was like a heartbeat, you know, like forgive him. It was just like a pattern that I had in my memory somewhere in the very far back at that point. And I realized in this situation that this is what she had tried to tell me, that it was absolutely necessary for me to forgive him so that my path wouldn't be over. And it was just in this situation that I understood what she actually meant. Up to then, I had always had this concept that she was asking me to forgive him for his sake, or for, you know, for his best intentions, or for her best intentions for him. But I had no idea that it was something that she was asking me to do for myself, because it was absolutely necessary for me to realize that I had to forgive him so that my life wasn't over. In a way, maybe my spiritual life would be over. That's what it felt like to me. And as soon as I had this idea that I had finally understood what my daughter tried to tell me, I realized that forgiving is actually very easy. And I decided, oh, that's what it was all about. So I have to forgive him. And I said immediately, I said it, I forgive him. And as soon as I said that, I felt like a wave of relief going through me, like a real inner emotional relief inside of me. And I remember I took a deep breath and I as I was breathing out, this huge boulder started to move towards the right side, and it started to roll down this mountain edge. And I was so astonished and shocked again that I bent over with my whole body to find out what was going on. And I saw that huge black boulder crushing down the side of the mountain, ripping out little pieces of grass and dirt and soil, and there were even small stones being catapulted into the air, and gushes of small pieces of soil and dirt in the air, like little clouds of dust rising up from the way that where it had been rolling down. And I saw it disappear, and as it was disappearing, I was too astonished to realize that there was obviously a reaction to my saying that I would forgive my husband. Obviously, this was combined in some way. And as I tried to figure out how I would be able to move a boulder of that size with just a sentence of saying, I forgive my husband, I was still trying to find out what was going on as I took some further steps towards this fence, this wooden fence. And later on, I realized that this must have been a symbol of the passing from this side onto the other side for good. And before I could reach it, I remember I took some steps, and as I was just lifting my foot for another step, I was being catapulted back into my ICU bed. I was laying down as if nothing had happened. I had my eyes open, and I remember that I was crying, like my tears were gushing down my cheeks. I was in a state of utter bliss. I was in a state of happiness, and I was so relieved. I can't even start to describe it. It felt like I just escaped life danger, and everything was over, and all of this threats, this life-threatening situation was gone. And I realized that for some reason I had this inner security, this inner safety, that everything that I had ever done in my life up to this moment was forgiven for me, as well as just the same way that I had forgiven my husband. So it felt like I was being pushed inside an emotional or spiritual washing machine. I went in with a lot of dirt and whatever it could have been, like very bad state, and I was coming out completely pure and white. That's what I felt like, and just freshly washed. And I felt like my whole life had been put to zero. So there was nothing from my past that was still a problem anymore. Just because I had forgiven my husband, I was in a way automatically forgiven the same way. It was so overwhelming to realize what had gone on, and that I was back, and that I had understood everything. And also to realize that my daughter had tried so bravely to make me see what she was trying to tell me. And I had not been able to understand anything until I was on the other side in this chamber of truth. And then on the mountaintop, realizing that I was in life danger. All of this was just such a relief to me. And I didn't want to wait for another second. I took my phone and I wrote my husband a short message saying that I'm absolutely sorry, that I was mad at him on the way to the hospital, and that I had realized that I had no right to condemn him or his actions, because I understand now that he didn't mean any harm, and that he didn't understand what was going on. And I also told him that I'm sure that our daughter is severely disabled, but that this is no problem at all. I wrote to him, it doesn't matter, we can adjust to that, and we will just make sure that we take the best care of her that we can do, and adjust our house. I told him we have to um, get a lift done so that we could lift her up to our balcony and stuff like that. So I had all kinds of ideas already how we could manage to do that and still be able to move her to the car and such. So I wrote him this short message, and I remember that I was so relieved. I had this inner conviction that nothing could ever happen to take this inner security away from me. I felt like I was wrapped up in the feeling or the knowledge that everything is fine and that everything will always be fine. It was something that also wrapped up into the future for some reason. I don't know why. But a few moments later, after I had with this short message made peace with my husband, and had healed the situation from this conflict before my NDE. So I realized everything is over. I have done everything I was supposed to do, and I was finally feeling very, very sleepy. It was in the early hours of the morning, and I hadn't slept all night, and I was willing to fall asleep at once because I felt so content with everything. And there was this acceptance even of the fate of my daughter. I felt like if I wouldn't mind, if I wouldn't want to change anything about it, if I would accept it, it would be okay. That was what it felt like. And a few moments later, my heart started to beat very drastically, so frantically. I felt that my heartbeat was very strange, and it felt like it was racing. And I realized this is not what my heart is like, but I'm again telepathically feeling what my daughter's heart is like. At that moment, more than an hour away from me by car, I felt what she was going through, and that she was that her state was declining. And I even felt that it was the hour before her death. I pleaded with the nurse so she should call the other clinic, and I'm so worried about the life of my child and stuff like that, but nobody would call. And so I was asking for a Bible. For some reason, I thought if I would read the psalm of her birthday, she would, in kind of, through the lines that I would read, she would let me know what state she would be in. So that was my idea. I would maybe get some reassurance, or maybe even just some information about what was going on. And so first they said I wouldn't get a Bible, and then a very young nurse said she would get it from another section of that clinic, because I told her I'd seen a Bible in the hallway in another section of that clinic. And so she said she would get it for me just without having to do it. She was just suggesting to get it for me. And until this very day, I'm so grateful for this person and for her trying to help me in this situation. And she knew that my child was dying, of course. And so she gave me this Bible. As soon as she was back, she handed it over to me, and I just opened it up very, very, very quickly. And I read the psalm, and it started with, Lord, I'm calling you in a very bad situation. And as soon as I read that, I felt like, oh my God, it's true. It's true what I'm feeling, that she's actually in a very, very bad place right now. And then I read on, and I was trying to find a line that said, oh, victory is coming, like something like this. But nothing of that was in there. So the last line was, Lord, please hear me in the hour that I'm calling for you. And there's a prayer that says, Lord, hear us in the hour of our death, like just the last hour of life before we die. And this is what it reminded me of. And of course, I knew that this was the message, that my daughter was dying right now. And there was no way I would get through to anyone, but it gave me some reassurance that at least, even though nobody informed me, I was informed by, I don't know, by telepathic communication between me and my daughter. And the doctor came in more than an hour later, and later it was confirmed that she died when I was reading this prayer and this psalm, and that I was right. So it was her last hour of life. And actually I was very blessed with having had this realization in time. So I didn't feel like I I was left out of her last stage of life. And I felt like maybe even there was some way of consolation for her to know that I would be with her and feel what she was going through. As I was informed that she had died, um, my first thought was, I want to be with my child, and if she's dead, I want to be dead also. It was just a very instinctive reaction in this situation. And as I was thinking that, I realized a few seconds later that I had no right uh, to have that wish, because I had two older children that need me. So I realized at once I can't have this wish, because I have um, to look after my older children. I have to be there for them. And so I had decided right after being told that she was dead, that there was no way for me to not try to survive, no matter how hard it would be, or no matter what I have to do to finalize that I was going to be okay again and healthy again. And it was just a matter of seconds. And they asked me if I wanted to see her um, right right now, so I could be transferred to the other clinic. And my husband didn't want to do that, but I said I want to see her for the last time, and be able to be reunited with her, because I was not granted to have her ever in my arms, because she was in this incubator in her little bed behind glass, and I was not even really able to touch her, just a little bit with my fingertips. I was reaching inside through a little door at the side of this incubator when I was able to see her right after my emergency operation. So there were a few minutes. The doctor told me only for 2 minutes. So I was able to connect with her for 2 minutes while she was still alive. And because I had said I wanted to see her, they had to do some final exams on me before transferring me to the other clinic. And that actually saved my life, because then they found out that there were lots of bodily fluids in my abdomen everywhere. And they had no idea where it had come from, because they were not reported that there had been some difficulties during the emergency operation. So I had some other procedures done, like we call it CR. And then I had to be in another emergency operation again. And this second emergency operation after my NDE saved my life. So they were able to stop the bleeding, and I had a miraculous recovery. I was walking down in the grounds of the hospital, like in a park around the hospital. I was doing rounds with my husband 2 or 3 days later. So I was it was a miracle, actually. And the doctors told me later on that even the fact that my daughter had still a heartbeat after they had tried to resuscitate her was also a medical miracle, how she could have a heartbeat after such a long time of having been clinically dead. My intention to give the blessing that I have received in this NDE, in such a hard situation for me, in a life-threatening situation. I was just saved actually by the love of my child, to be honest, because she tried to make me see what was necessary to do the next steps to survive, and to be there for my children and to be there for my family. And this is such a big blessing in my life. And even though my life was changed, up to this day, when my daughter died and I had my NDE, I felt that a totally new future started at the same time. And I was given a proof of eternity, really, because I had not been thinking about eternity too much, to be honest, before that happened. And afterwards, I knew immediately I was not ready to share it with anyone, because it was too holy for me and too wonderful what had happened. And at the same time, I haven't mentioned it yet, but until I told the first person, I had an inner state of euphoria. So it was a strange feeling of happiness, like a golden sphere of light around my heart. It felt really like a globe around my heart that that saved it from shattering, to be honest. That's what it felt like. And I knew I couldn't tell anyone, but it was like the love of my child and the love that I had for her, and the thankfulness for what she had done for me and for what she had done for the whole family, to be honest, was so huge that with the combination of the realization that she is alive on the other side, because of course I realized that she's alive on the other side, this was such a big help for me. And I thought I want to share it with as many people as possible, because it was life-changing for me in so many different levels, and not only about forgiveness, but also about the connection between children and parents, and to be able to see the door of life, and to be able to be in a chamber of truth and see the calculations, in a way, the a judgment of my life, but not in a destructive way. It was a judgment that was presented to me so that I could grasp what it was all about, and to go from there and to grow from there. And it was such a beautiful thing to happen to me that I decided to totally change my life, and it gave me so much strength. And I was thinking so many people would maybe be interested in hearing about it, especially people who mourn for a deceased loved one, especially people who mourn for their deceased own child. And I was thinking my story could give them so much strength and consolation, and a proof of eternity, a way of me just saying I can give some testimony that there is eternity and there is another side, and our children are capable of so much more than we think. Even as parents, my daughter was a newborn, and she was not even able to breathe on her own, and she had no brain functions at all, but she was arguing with me in a discussion in the way that not even a very good psychologist could do. She would try to connect with me on the level that I was on, and try to make me see past all my emotional wounds and disappointments. That was incredible, all of it.